I always expected my father to die as coldly as he lived, leaving behind nothing but a quiet house and a closed bank account. Instead, he left a grenade wrapped in legal stationery. 33 years of silence ended with a notification that I was named in his estate, and my sister Celeste was already moving to cut me out. She did not just want the money. She wanted to erase the proof that I ever existed at all. The fluorescent light in my office always hummed with a low and dying buzz around 4 in the afternoon. It was the sound of Marrow Glen, a city that felt like it was perpetually waiting for a train that had been canceled 20 years ago. I was staring at a stack of discovery documents for a routine slip-and-fall case when the receptionist dropped a thick envelope on my desk. She did not say a word. She just dropped it and walked away, her heels clicking a rhythmic retreat across the linoleum. I knew what it was before I saw the return address. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, and expensive. It felt out of place against the cheap laminate of my desk. It was the kind of stationery that announced bad news with polite font. Pell and Sorrell, LLP. I did not open it immediately. I sat there for a long moment, listening to the rain tap against the window. My father, Victor Flores, had been a ghost in my life for nearly a decade. He was a man who existed in phone calls I did not answer and birthday cards that contained checks but no notes. I had built a life in the silence he left behind. I was 33 years old. I was a paralegal who paid her rent on time. I had a cat named Jasper and a car that needed a new transmission. I was fine. I slit the envelope open with a letter opener. The letter was brief. Victor Flores had died of a sudden cardiac event 2 days ago. I was named in the estate. There was a memorial service scheduled for tomorrow at Larkhaven Chapel in the Harthwell district. I felt a hollow thud in my chest. It was not grief. Exactly. It was the sensation of a door slamming shut before you had the chance to walk through it. I had always imagined there would be a confrontation one day. I thought I would scream at him. I thought he would explain why he chose his new family over his old one, or why he let my sister turn into a stranger. Now, there would be no screaming. There would only be paperwork. The funeral the next day was a study in contrasts. Larkhaven Chapel was designed to make death feel expensive rather than sad. The walls were paneled in dark mahogany, and the air smelled intensely of refrigerated lilies and old money. I parked my dented sedan between a pristine Mercedes and a black Land Rover, feeling the familiar prickle of inadequacy that had defined my childhood. I walked in alone. The room was full of people I did not know. They were men in charcoal suits and women in understated jewelry, the kind of crowd that spoke in hushed tones about equity and portfolios. They were the people of the Harthwell district, the wealthy enclave on the hill where my father had moved after the divorce, and then there was Celeste. My sister stood near the front of the room, positioned like a statue in a museum. She was wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my first year of law school tuition would have. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, glossy knot, and her face was a mask of tragic composure. She was holding court, nodding graciously as people offered their condolences. She looked like the grieving daughter of a beloved patriarch. She looked like the only real heir. I stayed in the back, near the heavy oak doors. I did not want to be part of her performance. I watched as she dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. It was a beautiful act. If I did not know her, I might have believed it. The service was short and impersonal. The officiant spoke about Victor Flores as a pillar of the community, a man of integrity and vision. He did not mention the father who missed graduations, or the husband who traded one wife for a younger model and then discarded her too. He spoke of a stranger. When the service ended, the crowd began to filter out toward the reception hall. I turned to leave, intending to slip away before anyone realized the other daughter was there. Natalie. The voice was cool and sharp, cutting through the low murmur of the crowd. I froze. I turned around. Celeste was standing 5 feet away, up close. She looked tired. The makeup was perfect, but there was a tightness around her mouth that I recognized. It was the look she used to get before she snapped at me when we were teenagers. "Hello, Celeste," I said. She did not hug me. She did not reach out a hand. She just looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my off-the-rack blazer. I am surprised you came, she said. Her voice was low, meant only for me. I thought you would be too busy. I received the notice yesterday. I said, I thought I should be here. Celeste took a small step closer. The scent of her perfume was expensive and cold. Look, she said, I am going to be honest with you because we do not have time for games. This is going to be a complicated probate process. Victor's assets are tied up in complex structures. It is not going to be a simple payout. I did not ask for a payout, I said. She ignored me. The attorneys are going to send you some documents, she continued. Waivers, consents, standard things to streamline the process. I need you to just sign whatever they give you. I stiffened. I was a paralegal. I knew exactly what streamline the process meant in legal terms. It meant removing obstacles. Why would I do that, I asked. Because you have a small life. Natalie, she said. Her voice dropped to a whisper, venomous and soft. You have a job you need to keep. You have a rent payment you struggle to make. If you try to drag this out, if you try to make this messy, you are going to get hurt. The legal fees alone will bury you. Are you threatening me, I asked. I am giving you advice, she said. Go back to your apartment. Go back to your small life. Let me handle the heavy lifting. It is what Victor wanted. She stepped back, her mask of grief sliding back into place as a mourner approached us. Thank you so much for coming, she said loudly, offering me a sad, brave smile for the benefit of the audience. It means so much to the family. I walked out of the chapel with my heart hammering against my ribs. It was not fear. It was a cold, hard rage. She had not changed. She still thought she could bully me into disappearance. 2 days later, I was sitting in the conference room of Pell and Sorrell LLP. The office was located in a glass tower downtown, the kind of place where the elevator ride made your ears pop. The table was a slab of marble that felt like a tombstone. Graham Pell sat across from me. He was a man who seemed unusually rehearsed. His suit was perfectly tailored, his tan was artificial, and his smile did not reach his eyes. He opened a leather folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the marble. Ms. Flores, he began. His voice was smooth, like expensive bourbon. First, let me offer my condolences. Your father was a remarkable client. Thank you, I said automatically. He folded his hands on the table. We are in a unique situation, he said. Your father left a very specific set of instructions regarding his estate. He was a man who believed in structure. He pushed a second document toward me. It was a copy of a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was jagged and upright. The script of a man who pressed down hard on the pen. I picked it up. Natalie, if you are reading this, I am gone. I know we have not spoken. I know you think you understand why. You do not. I have left you a protected share of the estate through the Flores Family Legacy Trust. However, this is not a gift. It is a responsibility. To access this share, you must appear in probate court, and you must complete the compliance steps outlined by the trustee. You cannot settle. You cannot cash out early. You must see the process through. Do not let them buy you out. Victor. I read the letter twice. It did not sound like affection. It sounded like a command. It felt cold and controlling, exactly like the man I remembered. What are the compliance steps, I asked. Looking up at Graham, he cleared his throat. That is the complicated part. The trust stipulates that you must be present for all evidentiary hearings regarding the asset distribution. It also requires you to submit to a background review to ensure you meet the moral character clause of the trust. I laughed. A short, sharp sound. A moral character clause. My father left my mother for his secretary and then abandoned us both. Mr. Pell did not smile. It is standard in high-value trusts. He said, however, there is a counter-petition. He slid a thick legal brief across the table. I looked at the cover page. Petitioner Celeste Flores. Nature of action contest of will and petition to exclude heir. I felt the blood drain from my face. I flipped the page. Celeste claims that Victor was mentally compromised in his final months, Graham said, his voice devoid of emotion. She alleges that you, despite the estrangement, exerted undue influence through electronic communications to manipulate him into altering the trust structure. She claims you harassed him for money. I stared at him. That is a lie. I said, I have not spoken to him in 3 years. I have never asked him for a dime. Graham Pell shrugged. A microscopic movement of his shoulders. That is what the court will decide, he said. Celeste has submitted emails as evidence. Emails I asked. I never sent him emails. They have been entered into the preliminary record. Graham said, Ms. Flores, if you fight this, it will be public. It will be ugly. Celeste is willing to offer a nuisance settlement if you agree to disclaim your interest in the trust today. It is a generous amount. $50,000. $50,000. It was more money than I made in a year. It would pay off my student loans. It would fix my car. It would buy me freedom. All I had to do was agree that I was a manipulator. All I had to do was let Celeste win. I looked at the letter again. Do not let them buy you out. Why would he leave me a share if he thought I was manipulating him? I asked. Graham paused. That is the contradiction Celeste is relying on. She argues the amendment to the trust was signed under duress. I closed the folder. I am not signing anything today. I said. Graham Pell's eyes narrowed slightly. The polished veneer cracked for just a second. Ms. Flores, he said, litigation is expensive. We represent the estate, not you personally. If you proceed, you will be doing so alone against very well-funded opposition. I know, I said. I stood up. I will see you in court. Mr. Pell. I walked out of the office with my hands shaking, but I did not stop until I reached my car. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. She was trying to erase me. She was painting me as a predator to cover up her own greed. I drove straight to my apartment building, a brick block in the older part of town where the heating pipes clanked all night. I knocked on the door of 4B. Tessa opened it wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that said, Coffee is a food group. Tessa Miles had been my best friend since we were 7 years old. She was the only person who knew the full blast radius of the Flores family implosion. You look like you saw a murder, she said, pulling me inside. I might have seen a robbery. I said. I sat on her worn velvet couch and told her everything. The letter, the compliance steps, Celeste's petition, the accusation that I had manipulated a man who wouldn't even return my calls. When I finished, Tessa handed me a mug of tea that smelled like cinnamon and rage. She is gaslighting you on a legal level, Tessa said. That is impressive. In a sociopathic way. She has emails. Tess, I said, she has fake emails. Then you need a lawyer. She said, a real one, not the estate guy. You need a shark. I cannot afford a shark. I said, I can barely afford a goldfish. Celeste knows that. She is counting on me folding because I cannot pay the retainer. Tessa sat down next to me. Natalie, this isn't about the money. Is it? I looked down at the steam rising from the mug. No. I said, it is not. If he had left me nothing, I would have been fine. I expected nothing. But he left me instructions. He left me a test. And Celeste is lying to stop me from taking it. Why, Tessa asked. Why go to all that trouble if she wanted the money? She could just fight the percentages. Why invent a story about you manipulating him? Why try to destroy your reputation? Because she is afraid. I said. The realization hit me slowly. She looked scared at the funeral. She warned me to go back to my small life. She is not just greedy. Tessa. She is hiding something. Tessa nodded. Then you have to dig, she said. But do not use your work resources. Do not do anything they can track. If Celeste is willing to forge emails, she is willing to watch your search history. I slept on Tessa's couch that night. I did not want to be alone in my apartment. The next morning, I called in sick to the firm. It was the first time I had done that in 4 years. I got in my car and drove. I did not drive to the courthouse. I drove to the Harthwell district. I drove to his house. The house was a sprawling mid-century modern structure set back from the road. Hidden behind a wall of manicured hedges, it looked like a fortress. I had not stepped foot inside it since I was 22. The day I told him I was changing my last name back to my mother's maiden name, a threat I never followed through on, but one that ended our relationship anyway. I still had a key. It was a ridiculous thing to have. A small brass key on a keychain shaped like a lizard that I had bought on a vacation when I was 10. I kept it in my glove box, a sentimental relic of a time when I thought things might get better. I did not know if he had changed the locks. I walked up the long driveway. The house was silent. The curtains were drawn. I slid the key into the lock and turned it. It clicked. The door swung open. The smell hit me first. It was not the smell of a home. It was the smell of bleach, sharp, chemical, and overwhelming. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. "Hello," I called out. Silence. I walked through the living room. It was staged. That was the only word for it. The furniture was arranged perfectly. There were no magazines on the coffee table, no mail on the counter, no coats on the rack. It looked like a listing photo for a real estate brochure. I went to the kitchen. The counters were gleaming. I opened a drawer. Empty. I opened another. Empty. Someone had scrubbed the life out of this house. My heart started to beat faster. Celeste said she was handling the heavy lifting. Was this it? Erasing him. I walked down the hallway to his study. This was the room where he spent his life, the room where I was not allowed to play. The desk was bare. The bookshelves were half empty. The remaining books arranged by color. It was absurd. Victor Flores did not arrange books by color. He stacked them in chaotic piles. I stood in the center of the room, feeling a wave of frustration. There was nothing here, no answers, no clues, just a sanitized shell. Then I remembered, when I was a child, before the divorce, we lived in a different house, but he had the same desk. And when we moved here, he brought the desk. I used to hide things in the room when he was at work. I was a quiet child, always observing. There was a vent near the floor. Behind the heavy velvet drapes, the screws were loose. They had always been loose. I used to hide my diary there when I was afraid Celeste would read it. I walked over to the window and pulled back the drape. The vent cover was painted the same cream color as the wall. I knelt down and touched the bottom screw. It turned easily under my thumb. I unscrewed the bottom too and lifted the metal grate. It was dark inside the duct. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and turned on the flashlight. At first, I saw only dust, but then, tucked far back against the metal wall, I saw something white. I reached in. My fingers brushed against paper. I grabbed it and pulled it out. It was a white envelope. It was taped to the side of the duct with blue painter's tape. I pulled it free and sat back on my heels, breathing hard. The envelope was dusty. I wiped it off with my sleeve. On the front, written in that same jagged, forceful handwriting, were 3 words. Natalie, not Celeste. I stared at it. The date written in the corner was from 10 years ago. October 14th, 2016. That was the year the estrangement cemented. The year I stopped trying. My hands were trembling as I tore it open. Inside, there was a small silver key. It looked like a key to a safety deposit box or a lockbox. There was no bank name on it, just a number stamped into the metal 409. Wrapped around the key was a note, written on a scrap of yellow legal pad paper. If you want the truth, do not trust the first story. They will try to make it simple. It is not simple. That was it. No, I love you. No, I'm sorry. Just a warning and a key. I shoved the key and the note into my pocket. The smell of bleach suddenly felt suffocating, like it was trying to clean me out of the house, too. I needed to leave. I stood up and replaced the vent cover. Tightening the screws as best I could with my fingernail, I smoothed the drape back into place. I walked quickly to the front door, checking over my shoulder. The house felt hostile now. It felt like it was watching me. I got into my car and locked the doors. I drove 3 blocks before I pulled over to the side of the road to breathe. I looked at the key in my hand, 409. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I picked it up. It was an email notification. Subject notice of emergency hearing, Court Marrow County Probate Court, date tomorrow, 9 a.m. Celeste was moving fast. An emergency hearing meant she was trying to get a temporary order, probably to freeze the assets or appoint a special administrator of her choosing. She wanted to lock me out before I even had a lawyer. I was about to throw the phone down when a text message slid onto the screen. The number was unknown. No area code, just a string of digital noise. I opened the message. If you open what he left you, you will put a target on your back. I looked out the window. The street was empty. The trees were still. But suddenly, the silence of Marrow Glen did not feel empty. It felt like someone was holding their breath. I put the car in gear. I was not going back to my small life. Not now. I gripped the silver key in my pocket. My father had left me a puzzle, and my sister had declared war. I did not know what was in box 409, and I did not know who was watching me. But I knew one thing. I was going to find out. Klein Legal Aid and Advocacy was located 3 blocks from the courthouse, sandwiched between a bail bondsman and a donut shop that always smelled of burnt sugar. The sign on the door was peeling slightly at the corners, and the waiting room chairs were mismatched, but the woman sitting behind the desk looked like she could stare down a freight train. Ava Klein was not what I expected. She was younger than Graham Pell, maybe in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and hair pulled back in a messy bun that suggested she did not have time for vanity. Her desk was covered in stacks of files, but when I walked in, she swept a clear space in front of her and folded her hands. I told her everything. I told her about the letter, the compliance steps, the strange threats from Celeste, and the key I had found in the vent. I did not show her the key yet. I kept it deep in my coat pocket. My hand closed around it like a talisman. Ava listened without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen moving in quick, jagged strokes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and tapped the end of her pen against her chin. "This protected share," she said. Her voice was raspy, like she had spent too many years arguing in dusty courtrooms. "It is unusual. Usually, if a wealthy parent wants to control a child from the grave, they set up a standard trust with a trustee who doles out allowance, but requiring you to be present for every evidentiary hearing that is not about money management, that is about witnessing. Witnessing what I asked, whatever happens in probate," she said. "Your father built a mechanism to force you to watch, or maybe to force the court to see you. It is a shield, Natalie, or a weapon, but it is definitely not just an inheritance." She looked at me, her gaze piercing. "Pell and Sorrell are sharks," she said, "and Celeste has hired Darren Wexler. Do you know who he is?" I shook my head. "He is the kind of lawyer you hire when you want to scorch the earth." She said, "He does not just win cases, he dismantles the opposition's credibility until there is nothing left. If we take this case, they are going to come at you hard. They will try to bankrupt you, humiliate you, and break you. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the bleach smell in my father's empty house. I thought of the text message on my phone. "If you open what he left you, you will put a target on your back. I do not care about the money." I said, "I want to know why my sister is terrified." Ava smiled, a small, sharp expression that made her look dangerous. "Good," she said. "Then let us go to court." The hearing was held in courtroom 4, a high-ceilinged chamber that smelled of floor wax and judgment. The air conditioning was set too low, making the room feel like a meat locker. I sat next to Ava at the plaintiff's table, trying to keep my hands from shaking, on the other side of the aisle. Celeste sat with the posture of a queen in exile. She was flanked by 3 attorneys, but the man leading the charge was clearly Darren Wexler. He was a broad-shouldered man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my car. He did not look at me. He looked through me. The judge, a weary-looking woman named Honorable Judge Halloway, called the session to order. Wexler stood up. He did not waste time. "Your Honor," he began, his voice booming and authoritative, "we are here today to request an immediate freeze on the distribution of assets to Ms. Natalie Flores, pending a full competency review of the decedent's final trust amendments. We intend to show that Ms. Flores, despite her long estrangement, engaged in a campaign of emotional manipulation and harassment against a dying man." He picked up a stack of papers. "I have here a series of email exchanges between the decedent and the respondent, dated over the last 6 months of Victor Flores's life," he said. In these messages, Ms. Flores repeatedly demands money, threatens to expose embarrassing family secrets, and leverages her father's declining health to secure a place in the trust. My stomach dropped. I leaned over to Ava. I never wrote those, I whispered. Ava squeezed my arm under the table. Stay calm. Wexler began to read. Victor, if you do not wire the $10,000 by Friday, I am going to talk to the press about what happened in '99. You owe me this. He looked at the judge. This is not the voice of a grieving daughter, Your Honor. This is extortion. The courtroom felt like it was shrinking. I could feel eyes on me, the clerk, the bailiff, the few reporters in the back row. They were seeing exactly what Celeste wanted them to see, the greedy, unstable sister coming out of the woodwork. Ava stood up. She did not boom. She did not posture. She just walked to the lectern and adjusted her glasses. May I see the documents, Mr. Wexler? She asked. Wexler handed them over with a dismissive smirk. Ava flipped through them. She paused on the second page. She looked at the header. Then she looked at me, a question in her eyes. She walked back to our table and placed the paper in front of me. Is this his email address? She whispered. I looked at the tow line. v_flores_privatemeridian.net. I frowned. No, I whispered back. He never used his work email for personal things. He was paranoid about corporate oversight. He had a Gmail account he used for everything. Victor F72. Ava nodded. She turned back to the judge. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear, the respondent denies authorship of these emails. Furthermore, we note that these messages were sent to a corporate email address that the decedent notoriously avoided for personal correspondence. We formally request the metadata for these exchanges, including IP addresses and server logs, to verify their authenticity. Wexler bristled. Your Honor, this is a delay tactic. The emails are plain on their face. If they are authentic, Mr. Wexler, then the metadata will prove it, Ava said, cutting him off. Unless, of course, they were created yesterday by someone with administrative access to the Meridian server. The silence in the room was heavy. Celeste shifted in her seat. She whispered something to Wexler, her face tight. Judge Holloway looked over her spectacles. Discovery is granted. She ruled, Mr. Wexler, you will produce the metadata within 48 hours. We will reconvene next week. Wexler slammed his folder shut. Celeste turned to look at me. Her expression was not one of anger. It was one of pure, unadulterated panic. We walked out of the courthouse into the blinding afternoon sun. My adrenaline was crashing, leaving me feeling hollow and shaky. That was a setup, Ava said, lighting a cigarette the moment we hit the sidewalk. They forged those, and they did a sloppy job. Why would they be sloppy, I asked. Celeste is a perfectionist. Because they are rushing, Ava said. They did not expect you to hire counsel. They thought you would be overwhelmed by the accusation and settle. Now they have to scramble. I looked toward the parking lot. A black sedan was idling near the exit. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like oil slicks. I had seen that car earlier, parked outside Ava's office when I arrived. Ava, I said, that car. She followed my gaze. Government plates, she asked. No, I said. No plates on the front, just a dealer frame. Ava narrowed her eyes. Go home. Natalie, do not take the highway. Take the side streets, and call me if you see it again. I drove home taking the long way, winding through the residential districts. The black sedan pulled out of the lot behind me. I turned left. It turned left. I turned right. It turned right. My heart hammered against my ribs. I made a sudden, illegal U-turn in the middle of a quiet avenue, tires screeching. I looked in my rearview mirror. The sedan slowed down but did not follow. It continued straight, disappearing into traffic. I was being watched. I did not go home. I could not go home. I felt the key in my pocket burning a hole in the fabric. 409. I drove to the bank. Cinderlock Savings was an old institution, the kind with heavy brass doors and marble floors that echoed when you walked. It was on the other side of town from the Harthwell district, a place for working people, not heirs. I signed in at the front desk. My hand was steady, but my signature looked jagged. I need to access a safety deposit box. I said to the clerk, I have the key. Do you have the authorization card, she asked. I held my breath. No. My father. He passed away. I am the executor of his personal effects. She frowned. I will need to check the file. She disappeared into the back. I stood there for 5 minutes, expecting security to come and escort me out, expecting Darren Wexler to burst through the doors. The clerk returned with a small index card. Victor Flores added a secondary signer in 2016. She said, Natalie Flores. Is that you? Yes, I breathed. She checked my ID. Okay, follow me. The vault was cool and silent. The wall of boxes looked like a metallic honeycomb. The clerk unlocked her side of box 409, and I inserted my silver key. The lock tumbled. She pulled the long metal drawer out and set it on a table in a private viewing room. I will give you some privacy, she said. When the door clicked shut, I stared at the metal lid. This was it. The truth, or the trap. I lifted the lid. There were no diamonds, no stacks of cash. There was a single, plain black flash drive, and a photograph. I picked up the photo first. It was an old 4x6 print, slightly curled at the edges. It showed my father, younger, his hair still black. He was standing next to a woman I did not recognize. She was blonde, petite, with a nervous smile. They were standing in front of a brick building. The sign above their heads read, Briar Vale Credit Union. I turned the photo over. Nothing was written on the back. I picked up the flash drive. It felt light, insignificant, but I knew it was the heaviest thing in the room. I put the drive and the photo in my purse. I checked the box again to make sure I had not missed anything. It was empty. I left the bank, looking over my shoulder at every step. The black sedan was nowhere to be seen, but the feeling of being hunted remained. I went to Ava's office. It was safer than my apartment. I found it, I said, walking past the receptionist. Ava looked up from her computer. She saw my face and closed her door. Show me. I put the flash drive on her desk. She plugged it into a laptop that was not connected to the internet. Let us see what Victor was hiding. She said, the folder structure was chaotic. There were hundreds of files, but 3 stood out. Trust_amendments_final. P.D. F. Ledger _partial_ 2015.x. LSX. If _u_ r_ listening ... WAV. Ava clicked on the audio file. ... My father's voice filled the small office ... It was not the booming voice he used in business ... It was quiet, tired. Natalie, if you are listening to this, then I am dead. And if I am dead, you need to know that it was not an accident. I gasped. Ava reached out and gripped my hand. I have made mistakes. The recording continued. Huge mistakes. I thought I was building a legacy, but I was building a cage. Celeste is part of it now. I tried to keep her out, but she wanted in. She wanted the power. There was a pause. The sound of ice clinking in a glass. The money did not come from the firm, not the real money. It came from the cleanup. Briar Vale. We buried it. We buried all of it. But the bodies do not stay down. The ledger on this drive is incomplete, but it shows the flow. It shows where the 40 million went. Do not trust Pell. Do not trust the family. And for God's sake, Natalie, do not sign the NDA. If you sign, they win. If you fight, you might survive. The recording ended with a sharp click. The room was silent. I could hear the traffic outside, distant and muffled. He knew. I whispered. He knew he was going to die, and he knew Celeste was involved. Ava said, her face was grim. Briar Vale Credit Union. Why does that sound familiar? She started typing on her phone. It collapsed. She said, 15 years ago, it was a massive local scandal. Pension funds evaporated, small accounts wiped out. The CEO went to prison for 2 years. But the money was never recovered. I looked at the photo of the woman. Who is she? I asked. I do not know, Ava said. But if she is in the picture, she knows where the money went. We need to find her. I said, we need to be careful. Ava corrected. Victor said $40 million. People kill for $400. Natalie, for $40 million, they will burn down the city. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Celeste. Dinner, tonight, 7 o'clock, Ridgefall Bistro, just us. Please, I showed it to Ava. Do not go. She said, I have to. I said, I need to see her face. I need to see if she knows I found the box. Ridgefall Bistro was the kind of place where the menu did not have prices, and the waiters whispered. I arrived at 7 sharp. Celeste was already there, sitting at a corner table, nursing a glass of white wine. She looked impeccable, as always, but her eyes were darting around the room, scanning the exits. Natalie, she said when I sat down. Thank you for coming. I did not sit. I stood by the chair. What do you want? Celeste. Please sit, she said. People are watching. I sat. I want a truce. She said, this legal battle, it is getting out of hand. Wexler is aggressive. I tried to rein him in, but he does what he thinks is best for the estate. You mean lying? I asked. Forging emails. She flinched. I did not know about that. She said, I swear. Stop it, I said. I heard the recording. Celeste. Her face went pale. The wine glass trembled in her hand. What recording? She whispered. I leaned in. The one where Dad says you wanted in. Where he says you are part of the cage. Celeste stared at me. For a moment, the mask dropped completely. I saw terror. Pure, unadulterated terror. You do not know what you are doing, she hissed. Her voice was so low I could barely hear it. You think this is about Dad? You think this is about some family drama? This is bigger than us. Then tell me. I said, tell me what is going on. I can't, she said. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back angrily. If I talk, we lose everything. The house, the accounts, the reputation. I do not care about the reputation, I snapped. They will hurt you. Natalie, she said. She reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was painful. They are not lawyers. They are cleaners. If you keep pushing, your job, your apartment, things will get complicated. Is that a threat? I pulled my hand away. It is a warning, she pleaded. Just take the settlement. I can get them to raise it. 100,000, 200. Just take it and leave Marrow Glen. Go somewhere safe. Who are they? I asked. She looked away. She picked up her purse. I cannot save you if you stay, she said. She stood up, throwing a $100 bill on the table. Goodbye, Natalie. She walked out of the restaurant without looking back. I drove home with my heart in my throat. The conversation had not been a truce. It had been a final notice. When I got to my apartment building, the hallway light was out. It was usually out, but tonight the darkness felt heavy. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs to 4B. I reached for my keys, but then I stopped. The door was unlocked. I always locked my door. I was obsessive about it. I pushed it open slowly. Jasper, my cat, ran out from under the sofa and wound around my legs, meowing frantically. I stepped inside and flipped the switch. The apartment looked normal. The TV was there. My laptop was on the coffee table, but the air felt disturbed. I walked to the bedroom. My dresser drawers were slightly open, not ransacked, just checked. I went to the closet where I kept my important papers in a fireproof box. The box was still there. I opened it. My birth certificate, my passport, my lease, all there. But the small velvet jewelry case where I had hidden the empty plastic casing of the flash drive, just to test if anyone was looking, was moved. I had left it under a stack of old birthday cards. Now it was sitting on top of them. Someone had been here. They were not looking for valuables. They were looking for information. They wanted the drive. I grabbed Jasper and my laptop bag. I could not stay here. I drove to Tessa's house, constantly checking the mirrors. The black sedan was not there, but I knew they were close. The next morning, I met Ava at a coffee shop 3 towns over. We did not want to be near her office or my apartment. They broke in. I said they were looking for the drive. Ava looked grim. "We need to secure the evidence," she said. "We make copies. We put one in a cloud server with a dead man's switch. We put another in a physical safe deposit box in a different county, and we document everything. Every threat, every strange car." She opened her laptop. "I went through the ledger last night." She said, "It is complex. Shell companies moving money to other shell companies. But there is a pattern." She turned the screen to me. "Every month. For 5 years. A transfer of $50,000 went to an entity called North Pine Community Foundation." "North Pine?" I asked. "It sounds like a charity. It is registered as one." Ava said, "But look at the notes." She scrolled to the bottom of the spreadsheet. There, in a cell that looked like it had been added as an afterthought, was a typed note. 40 million can disappear clean if everyone stays quiet. I stared at the numbers. My father was laundering money. I said, "Or paying someone off." Ava said, "North Pine is the key. If we can find out who runs it, we can find out who is holding the leash." She closed the laptop. "We are going to file a petition for a neutral administrator," she said. "We are going to argue that the current executors are compromised by criminal conflicts of interest. That will make it public." I said, "Yes," Ava said, "and that is the only thing that will keep you safe. If this is a secret, they can kill you to keep it, if it is a headline. You are too dangerous to touch." I looked out the window at the passing cars. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. "Okay," I said. "File it." Ava nodded. "This shifts everything. Natalie, we are not fighting for an inheritance anymore. We are fighting for survival." I touched the pocket where the flash drive was hidden. "I know," I said, "and I am not running away." I thought about Celeste's terrified face. I thought about the man in the black suit I hadn't met yet but knew was coming. I thought about my father, dying alone in that big, empty house, trying to leave a breadcrumb trail for the daughter he abandoned. I was going to finish this. No matter who I had to drag into the light, the war for my father's estate did not happen with shouting matches or thrown vases. It happened in the quiet, suffocating accumulation of paper. Ava Klein filed the motion for a neutral special administrator on a rainy Tuesday, arguing that Celeste and her legal team had demonstrated a conflict of interest that endangered the integrity of the assets. It was an aggressive move, a declaration that we did not trust the fox to guard the henhouse. Celeste, or rather Darren Wexler, fired back within 6 hours. I was sitting in Ava's office, watching the rain streak the window. When the courier arrived, Ava ripped open the packet and scanned the top sheet. Her expression did not change, but her jaw tightened. "They are filing a counterpetition," she said, tossing the document onto the desk. "What does it say?" I asked. "They are claiming risk of dissipation." Ava said, "Wexler is arguing that because your financial situation is, in his words, precarious, you are a flight risk with the assets. He is asking the judge to freeze your potential share entirely and to block you from receiving any interim distributions until the main trial concludes." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Interim distributions were the only reason I could afford to keep fighting. I had burned through my savings hiring Ava. I was living on credit cards and panic. "They are trying to starve me out." I said, "Exactly." Ava said, "They know they cannot win on the facts, so they are going to win on the economics. They want you to look at your bank account, realize you cannot pay rent next month, and take the settlement." She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "We are not going to let them. But Natalie, you need to be prepared. This is going to get tight." I went home that night and stared at my laptop. My apartment felt smaller than usual. The shadow of the break-in still hung over the place, making every creak of the floorboard sound like an intruder. I checked the locks 3 times. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and opened the duplicate files we had made from the flash drive. I was a paralegal. I knew how to organize chaos. That was my job. I took the chaotic spreadsheet from the flash drive and started building a timeline. I needed to see the shape of the lie. I started with the dates. The transfers to North Pine Community Foundation began in February of 2015. They were consistent. $50,000 every month, like a heartbeat. I opened a second window and started searching for public records regarding my father's company. Flores Meridian Holdings. I scrolled through annual reports, press releases, and old business news archives. February of 2015. I found a press release from March of that year. Flores Meridian announces strategic restructuring and new compliance initiatives. The dates lined up perfectly. My father started paying North Pine exactly 1 month before he publicly announced that his company was cleaning house. I looked at the payments again. They were not marked as charitable donations. They were marked as consulting retainers. Consulting for what? North Pine was a foundation. Foundations did not consult. They gave grants. I dug deeper into the metadata of the files. The author of the spreadsheet was listed simply as VF, Victor Flores. But the last person to modify the file, back in 2018, was listed as MK. I thought about the photograph from the safety deposit box. The woman standing next to my father in front of the Briarvale Credit Union. I opened a new tab and typed, Briarvale Credit Union Staff 2010. The search results were thin. The credit union had collapsed in a mess of bad loans and embezzlement accusations almost 15 years ago. Most of the news stories were about the CEO, a man named Thomas Gentry, who went to prison. I clicked on an old community forum, a message board for local residents who had lost money in the collapse. The posts were angry, desperate, and full of names. Gentry was the fall guy. One user wrote in 2011, "The whole board knew," and the compliance officer just walked away. Who was the compliance officer? Another user asked. Marion Kells. The first user replied, "She disappeared right before the audit. Marion Kells, MK." I typed the name into the search bar. Marion Kells, Marrow Glen, nothing, no social media, no LinkedIn, no property records. It was like she had evaporated. I tried a different angle. I searched for Marion Kells in old newspaper archives, looking for anything unrelated to the scandal. I found a wedding announcement from 1995. Marion Kells to wed David Shore, and then a divorce filing in 2005, and then an obituary from 2012. Robert Kells, beloved father of Marion, passed away at Juniper Terrace Assisted Living. Juniper Terrace. I looked at the date. If her father died there, maybe her mother was still there, or maybe the facility had a forwarding address. It was a long shot, but I did not have anything else. The next morning, I called in sick to work again. My boss was beginning to sound impatient, but I did not care. I drove to Juniper Terrace, a sprawling beige complex on the edge of town where the lawn was too green and the silence was heavy. The front desk was manned by a woman with a tight smile and a clipboard. "I am looking for information on a resident's family member," I said, trying to look official. "A Marion Kells. Her father Robert was a resident here. I am sorry," the woman said, her smile not wavering. "We cannot disclose information about past or current residents due to privacy regulations. I just need to know if she is still in the area." I said, "I have some documents for her regarding a legal matter. You can leave your card." She said, "If we have contact information on file, we will pass it along." I knew she wouldn't. I could see the wall going up in her eyes. I walked away from the desk, frustrated. I wandered down the hallway toward the exit, passing a nurse's station. A woman in blue scrubs was organizing a cart of medication. She looked up as I passed. She looked at me, then down at the visitor badge I was peeling off my jacket. "Are you the one asking about Marion?" she asked quietly. I stopped. "Yes." The nurse looked left, then right. "I remember her." She said, "She used to come every Sunday to see her mother. Mrs. Kells. Mrs. Kells passed 3 months ago." "Oh," I said, "I am sorry. Marion still sends a check for the memorial fund every month." The nurse said, "She was a nice woman. Sad. Always looked like she was looking over her shoulder." "Do you know where she lives?" I asked. The nurse shook her head. "No, the checks come from a P.O. box in Seabrink. But She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notepad. She scribbled something on it, tore off the sheet, and folded it into a tiny square. She pressed it into my hand. She sent a letter with the last check. The nurse whispered. She signed it differently. I noticed because I processed the donation. I looked at the nurse. Thank you. Go, she said. Before the administrator sees us, I walked out to the parking lot and got into my car. My hands were shaking as I unfolded the paper. In the nurse's hurried handwriting, there were 3 words: Sarah O'Malley. She had changed her name. Marion Kells was dead. Sarah O'Malley was alive. My phone buzzed. It was Ava. Get to the office, she said. The bank subpoenas came back. You are not going to believe this. I drove fast. When I got to Ava's office, she was pacing. Her desk was covered in bank statements. We got the records for the vendor payments, Ava said without preamble. The ones Celeste's team tried to block. She picked up a sheet of paper and handed it to me. It was a transaction history for a company called Dovetail Risk Strategies. Look at the outgoing payments, Ava said. I scanned the list: rent, utilities, server maintenance, and then, halfway down the page, consulting fee, C. Flores, $5,000, monthly, starting 3 years ago. My sister was on their payroll. I stared at the paper. Celeste was receiving money from a vendor that worked for our father's company. Why, I asked. What does she know about risk strategies? Nothing, Ava said. That is the point. It is a hush payment. Natalie, or a loyalty payment. Your father feared this pipeline, but your sister is drinking from it. This proves she has a financial interest in keeping the estate's secrets buried. Does this help us? I asked. It kills her credibility, Ava said grimly. But it also means she is compromised. She is not just protecting the family name anymore. She is protecting her own income. I need to talk to her. I said, Natalie, no. Ava warned. I have to. I said, I need to look her in the eye and ask her if $5,000 a month was the price of her soul. I did not call her. I waited. I knew Celeste's routine. She went to a spin class in the Harthwell district every Thursday evening at 6. It was part of her performance of the perfect life. I parked my car in the back of the gym lot and waited. At 7:15, she walked out, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a gym bag that probably cost more than my rent. I got out of the car. Celeste. She froze. She looked around, panicked, before spotting me. She walked over quickly, her voice a harsh whisper. Are you insane? You cannot be here. If Wexler sees us. Forget Wexler. I said, I saw the bank records. Celeste, Dovetail Risk Strategies, $5,000 a month. Her face went white. Even the flush from the exercise vanished. You were digging, she said. I told you not to dig. Why? I demanded. Why are you taking money from them? Did Dad know Dad set it up? She hissed. I stepped back, stunned. What? He trained me. Natalie. She looked frantic, her eyes wide and wet. He told me that one day the past might come knocking. He told me that there were people we needed to keep happy. He said if I became the point of contact, they would leave the rest of the family alone. He was trying to protect us from who I asked. Who is Dovetail? They are the ones who clean up the messes, she said. They are the ones who made sure the Briarvale investigation stopped at the CEO. Dad was terrified of them. He paid them to keep the silence, and he paid me to be the face of it. So you sold me out, I said. You framed me as a manipulator to keep your handlers happy. I had to, she cried. If the estate goes into open probate, if the books are opened, Dovetail gets exposed, and if they get exposed... She stopped. She looked over my shoulder at a car passing on the street. You do not understand, she whispered. They do not sue people. Natalie, they erase people. Then help me stop them, I said. Help me expose it. She shook her head violently. I can't. I am in too deep, and now you are too. She unlocked her car and threw her bag inside. Just stop, Natalie, please. Before the man in the suit comes for you. She got in and drove away, tires squealing on the asphalt. I stood there in the parking lot, the exhaust fumes hanging in the air, the man in the suit. 2 days later, we were back in court. Judge Holloway looked furious. She held the forensic report in her hand like a weapon. "Mr. Wexler," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "this report from the independent forensic examiner states unequivocally that the emails you submitted as evidence of Miss Flores's misconduct were created 3 days after the decedent's death." Wexler stood up, adjusting his tie. He did not look embarrassed. He looked annoyed. "Your Honor, we are as shocked as the court," he said smoothly. "My client provided those documents in good faith. We relied on a third-party security consultant to retrieve the data from the decedent's server. It appears this consultant may have overzealously reconstructed corrupted files." "Reconstructed," Ava said, standing up. "They were fabricated." The judge slammed her gavel. "This is a serious violation of this court's trust. Mr. Wexler, I am striking the emails from the record, and I am issuing a formal reprimand to your firm. If I smell even a hint of fraud again, I will refer this matter to the state bar. We understand." "Your Honor," Wexler said, "we will sever ties with the consultant immediately." "Who is the consultant?" Ava asked. "We want the name for the record." Wexler hesitated. "The firm contracted with Dovetail Risk Strategies for data recovery," he said. The name hung in the air. Dovetail. The judge narrowed her eyes. "Proceed with the discovery," she said. "And Mr. Wexler, tell your client that her petition to freeze Ms. Flores's assets is denied. The risk of dissipation seems to be coming from your side of the aisle. We won the battle, but as I walked out of the courtroom, I did not feel like a winner. I felt like I had just painted a target on my chest in neon paint. We had forced them to say the name. That night, back at Ava's office, we listened to the rest of the audio file. We sat in the dark, the only light coming from the street lamps outside. Victor's voice was raspy on the recording. After the collapse, they offered us a way out. They called it Harbor Shield. It sounded like a protection program. They moved the witnesses. They moved the compliance officers. They gave them new names, new lives in quiet towns. But it was not protection. It was containment. I thought of Marion Kells, Sarah O'Malley, living in Sebring. I signed the silence agreement. Victor said, "I agreed to launder the buyout money through the foundation. I thought I was buying peace, but you cannot buy peace from people who trade in secrets. The inheritance, the trust. It is all conditioned, if you are hearing this. Natalie, it means I failed to break free, and now the test is yours. You can keep the money and keep the secret, or you can break the seal. But if you break the seal, Harbor Shield will break you." The recording ended. I sat back in my chair, feeling cold. He did not leave me a gift. I said, "He left me a bomb. He left you a choice." Ava said softly, "He knew I would not take the money." I said, "He knew I was the stubborn one. He knew I would dig. He used me." Ava, he used his own death to trigger an investigation he was too coward to start while he was alive. It was a betrayal deeper than the abandonment. He had turned his daughter into a weapon without her consent. "I need air," I said. I walked to the grocery store down the street. I needed to do something normal. I needed to buy milk. I needed to stand under bright fluorescent lights and pretend that my life was not a conspiracy. The store was quiet. I walked down the dairy aisle, the cool air from the coolers chilling my skin. I reached for a carton of almond milk. "Natalie." I froze. A man was standing next to me. He was wearing a generic gray windbreaker and a baseball cap pulled low. He was looking at the yogurts. Not at me. "I do not know you," I said, my voice tight. "You have something that does not belong to you," he said. His voice was casual, conversational, like he was asking about the expiration date on the milk. "I do not know what you are talking about." I said, "The drive," he said, "and the key. They are property of the estate, and the estate is under protection." I stepped back. "Are you threatening me?" "I am saving you time," he said. He turned to look at me then. His eyes were flat. "Dead things. Give it back. Or the next time we meet, it won't be in a grocery store." He turned and walked away, disappearing down the aisle toward the bakery. I dropped the milk. It burst on the floor, a white puddle spreading across the linoleum. I ran. I ran back to Ava's office, my lungs burning. I burst through the door. Ava was standing by her desk, holding a thick envelope. Her face was pale. "What happened?" she asked, seeing my panic. "A man," I gasped. "In the store. He knows about the drive." Ava looked at the envelope in her hand. "This just came," she said. "By courier. No return address." She opened it. Inside was a single sheet of heavy, cream-colored paper. I walked over and read it. "If Natalie Flores names North Pine in open court, she will lose more than money." I looked at Ava. "They know we know." I said. Ava nodded. "We name them," she said. "We name them, and we pray the judge is listening." I looked at the paper. It was not a legal threat. It was a promise of violence. I thought about Marion Kells. I thought about the fear in Celeste's eyes. "I am not stopping," I said. Ava looked at me, a mixture of fear and respect in her eyes. "Then we better write a hell of a motion," she said. The war of paper was over. The real war had just begun. Fear did not taste like metal. As the cheap detective novels claimed, it tasted like bile and old coffee. It lived in the back of my throat, a permanent resident that woke me up at 3 a.m. and kept me staring at the ceiling until the sun turned the gray sky of Marrow Glen into a bruised purple. My body was rejecting the stress. I had lost 5 pounds in a week. My hands had developed a fine, persistent tremor that made typing difficult. Every time a car door slammed outside my apartment building, my heart would hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Hypervigilance, Tessa called it. I called it survival. I was not sleeping, but I was not paralyzed. I refused to let the fear make my decisions for me. If they wanted to scare me into silence, they were going to have to do better than cryptic texts and empty houses. Tessa Miles became my general. She moved into my apartment for 3 days. Sleeping on the couch with a baseball bat within arm's reach, she forced me to eat. She set up a protocol for my digital life that would have made a spy proud. "We are not using the cloud for the good stuff," she said, handing me a stack of encrypted hard drives. "We are using the air gap method. If it touches the internet, they can see it, so the evidence stays offline." She made me check in every 2 hours if I did not text her a specific emoji by the hour mark. She was instructed to call Ava, and then the police. It felt dramatic. It felt necessary. "We cannot let them isolate you," Tessa said, pouring me another cup of herbal tea that I would probably throw up later. "That is how they win. They make you feel like you are the crazy one." "I am the crazy one," I said, rubbing my temples. "I am fighting a ghost corporation over money I do not even want. You are fighting for the truth." She corrected, "And that is expensive." Ava Klein agreed. The next morning, she called me into her office early. She had locked the front door and drawn the blinds. Sitting in the client chair was a man who looked so average he was almost invisible. He wore a brown suit that was slightly too large, and he had the kind of face you forgot the moment you looked away. "Natalie, this is Hollis Crane," Ava said. "He is a private investigator. He specializes in corporate forensics." Hollis did not smile. He nodded once. "I have been looking into North Pine," he said. His voice was dry, like shifting sand. "It is a ghost ship. No employees, no office, just a registered agent in Delaware and a bank account that receives monthly deposits from various shell companies." "Is it illegal?" I asked. "Technically, no," Hollis said. "It is a foundation, but the board of directors is interesting." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a chart of names connected by thin black lines. 3 of the board members are former executives of a company called Dovetail Risk Strategies. He said, "Dovetail." I said, "That is the firm Celeste is paying. That is the firm that forged the emails." Hollis nodded. "Dovetail is a security firm in the same way that a shark is a fish," he said. "They do not just provide guards. They provide reputation management, crisis containment. If a CEO gets caught embezzling, Dovetail comes in, scrubs the servers, pays off the witnesses, and relocates the problem. And North Pine, I asked. North Pine is the payroll department for the silence. Hollis said, they move the money to the people who need to be kept quiet. They call them grants or consulting fees, but it is hush money. I looked at the chart. My father's name was not there, but the connection was undeniable. So my father was paying North Pine to pay someone else, I asked, or he was paying North Pine to keep himself safe. Hollis said, we found a recurring transfer from North Pine to a clinic in Sebring, a place called the Coastal Wellness Center. It is a nonprofit. Sebring, I whispered. That is where the nurse said Marion Kells went. Hollis raised an eyebrow. If she is there, she is being paid by the same people who are threatening you, he said. The intercom buzzed. Ava pressed the button. What is it? A courier, the receptionist said. From Mr. Wexler's office. Ava looked at me. Let us see what they are offering today. The package contained a settlement agreement. It was thick, bound in blue paper. Ava read the cover letter and let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. They are offering you $75,000, she said. I stared at her. 75,000. My share of the estate should be in the millions. It is a nuisance fee. Ava said, but look at the terms. She flipped to the back of the document. The beneficiary agrees to a complete and total non-disclosure of all matters related to the estate, the decedent's business dealings, and the Flores Family Legacy Trust. This confidentiality extends to any knowledge, past, present, or future, regarding the entities known as North Pine Community Foundation and Dovetail Risk Strategies. They want to buy my silence on things I haven't even learned yet. I said. Ava nodded. This NDA is sweeping. If you sign this, you cannot even tell a therapist about this without risking a lawsuit. They want to gag you for life. I felt a surge of anger that burned through the exhaustion. No. I said, Natalie. Ava started, playing devil's advocate. It is immediate money. It ends the fear. You could walk away. I looked at the chart Hollis had drawn. I looked at the names of the men who made money by burying the truth. If I sign that, I am one of them. I said, I am just another person on the payroll. I pushed the document away. Tell them no. Ava smiled. I was hoping you would say that. The rejection did not sit well. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Celeste. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again, I answered on the fourth ring. What? Celeste. You are trying to destroy us, she screamed. Her voice was not the polished, controlled instrument she used in public. It was ragged. You are trying to burn the house down with us inside it. I am trying to find out why the house smells like gasoline. I said calmly, why did you offer me pennies? Celeste. Because that is all we can afford, she cried. You think there are millions sitting in a vault? It is gone. Natalie. It is tied up. It is leveraged. Leveraged for what I asked. To pay Dovetail Silence. You saw the records, she whispered. You know. I know you are paying them $5,000 a month. I said, I know Dad was paying North Pine. We have to pay them, she hissed. If we stop paying, the protection stops. And if the protection stops, the lawsuits start, the criminal charges. Dad left a mess. Natalie, a massive, illegal mess. He trained me to manage it. He trained me to keep certain people calm. So you are paying blackmail. I said, I am paying for survival, she shouted. And you are too stupid to realize that by fighting this, you are cutting the safety line. Just take the $75,000. Please, it is all the liquid cash we have left. I felt a moment of pity for her. She sounded terrified. She was not the villain. She was just another victim who had decided to collaborate. I cannot do that. Celeste, I said, I am not going to live my life looking over my shoulder. Then you are going to lose, she said, her voice dropping to a flat, dead tone. And when you lose, do not come crying to me. She hung up. The next day, Judge Holloway threw us a curveball. We were expecting a ruling on our motion for a special administrator. Instead, we got an order for mediation, the court, noting the familial relationship between the parties and the complex nature of the allegations, orders a mandatory mediation session to take place within 10 days. The order read. "It is a stall tactic," Ava said, throwing the paper onto her desk. "Wexler pushed for this behind the scenes. He wants to drag this out. He knows we are bleeding money. He wants to force you into a room and browbeat you until you sign. 10 days. I said, that gives us 10 days to find something that breaks the case wide open. It gives them 10 days to hide whatever is left." Ava countered, "We need Marion Kells." I said. Ava looked at Hollis. "Can you find her?" Hollis pulled a map out of his briefcase. "I already have. Sarah O'Malley. She works as an intake coordinator at the Coastal Wellness Center in Sebring. It is a 3-hour drive." I stood up. "I am going." "Natalie." "No," Ava said. "It is dangerous. Sebring is isolated. If North Pine is funding that clinic, it is their territory. I have to," I said. Celeste admitted she is paying to keep people calm. Marion is one of those people. If I can get her to talk, if I can get her to testify that she is being paid for silence, the NDA blows up. The whole scheme blows up. "I will go with you," Hollis said. "No," I said. "If a PI shows up, she will clam up. She will think it is an interrogation. It has to be me. Just me. The daughter." Ava looked unhappy, but she nodded. "Take the rental car," she said. "Do not take your own, and keep your phone tracking on. If you stop moving for more than 15 minutes, Hollis is coming after you." The drive to Sebring was a journey into gray. The further I drove from Marrow Glen, the thicker the fog became. The town was a cluster of weathered shingles and salt-blasted storefronts clinging to the edge of the Atlantic. It looked like a place people went to be forgotten. The Coastal Wellness Center was a small, converted house on the outskirts of town, overlooking a rocky cliff. I parked the rental car, a generic silver sedan, down the street and walked up. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and damp wool. A woman sat behind the reception desk, typing on an old computer. She looked different than the photo in the safe deposit box. Her hair was gray now, cut short and practical. Her face had lines that spoke of years of looking at things she wished she could unsee. But the eyes were the same, nervous, watchful. "Marion?" I asked softly. She stopped typing. Her hands froze over the keyboard. She did not look up immediately. She took a breath, a long, shaky inhale. "There is no one here by that name," she said. Her voice was flat. "I know who you are." I said, "I am Natalie, Victor Flores's daughter." She looked up then. Her eyes widened. She scanned my face, looking for her former boss in my features. "You have his chin," she said quietly. She stood up and walked around the desk. She went to the front door and locked it. Then she flipped the sign to closed. "Come to the back," she said. Her office was tiny, cluttered with files. She sat down heavily in a creaking chair and gestured for me to take the stool opposite her. "They told me he died," she said. "I expected someone to come, but I did not expect you. I expected a man in a suit. I have met the men in suits." I said, "They want me to sign a paper and go away." "And you won't?" she asked. "No." She let out a bitter laugh. "You are braver than he was, or more foolish. Tell me what happened." "Marion." I said, "Please, my sister is terrified. My father died, leaving me riddles. What is North Pine? What is Harbor Shield?" Marion rubbed her face with her hands. She looked exhausted, a bone-deep weariness that had nothing to do with sleep. Briar Vale collapsed because of fraud. She began, "Massive, systemic fraud. Your father did not start it. He was brought in to save the bank. But by the time he realized how deep the rot was, it was too late. The money was gone, pension funds, savings, so he covered it up." I asked. "He had to," she said. "The people who stole the money, they were powerful. Natalie, politicians, developers, people who do not go to jail. When the collapse happened, they hired Dovetail to contain the blast radius, and Harbor Shield. It was their solution," she said. "They called it a witness protection program, but it was private, it was corporate. They took the people who knew the truth, the compliance officers like me, the accountants, and they relocated us. They gave us new identities, new jobs in safe little nonprofits funded by North Pine. That sounds like protection, I said. She leaned forward, her eyes hard. It is not protection. It is a cage. We signed agreements. If we speak, if we step out of line, the money stops. And not just the money. They have our old identities. They have the power to ruin us. They can plant evidence. They can destroy our credit. They can make sure we never work again. It is life-ruining pressure. They do not kill you, Natalie. They just make you wish you were dead. She looked at the window, at the gray fog pressing against the glass. Your father. He hated it. He hated being their bagman. He funneled the money through his company to North Pine to pay for our upkeep. He was the jailer, but he was also a prisoner. He left me a recording. I said, he said he tried to unwind it. He did. Marion said, 3 years ago, he came to see me. He had a plan. He drafted a memorandum of understanding, a document that would have confessed to the scheme and set up a restitution fund. He was going to turn himself in. What happened, I asked. Celeste, Marion said. I felt a chill. Celeste stopped him. She flew out here the next day. Marion said, she was frantic. She told him that if he went public, the scandal would destroy the family. She said the investors would sue them into oblivion. She said she had made her own deals to keep the peace. She intervened. I whispered, to protect the money, to protect herself. Marion corrected. She liked the life, Natalie. She liked the prestige. She could not imagine a world where the name Flores meant criminal, so she convinced him to wait, to bury it again, and he was weak. He loved her too much to ruin her. Marion opened a drawer in her desk. She pulled out a manila envelope. He left this with me, she said. He said, keep this safe, in case I find my courage. She slid the envelope across the desk. It is the memorandum. She said, signed by Victor, witnessed by me. It details the entire structure. North Pine, Dovetail, the payoffs. I stared at the envelope. It was the bomb my father had been too afraid to detonate. Why are you giving this to me, I asked. If I use this, the money stops. Your life here. It ends. Marion looked around the small, sad office. I am tired of being Sarah O'Malley, she said. I am 60 years old. Natalie, I live in a town I hate, doing a job I do not care about, afraid of my own shadow. She met my gaze. Your father was a coward. But he wanted to be good. He wanted you to be the one who finished it. That is why he left you the share. That is why he made the rules so hard. He wanted you to be angry enough to burn it down. She stood up. Take it, and go, before I change my mind. I took the envelope. It felt hot in my hands. Thank you, I said. Do not thank me, she said, unlocking the door. Just make sure it was worth it. I walked back to the car in a daze. The fog had thickened to a soup. I sat in the driver's seat and tucked the envelope under the floor mat. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Check engine, brake system failure, tire pressure low, airbag deployed. Every warning light was flashing. I frowned. The car was a rental. It was brand new. I put it in drive and tapped the gas. The car moved, but the steering felt heavy. I drove slowly to the nearest gas station, a rundown place with a mechanic bay. My heart was pounding. The mechanic was a greasy teenager who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. He popped the hood. He looked for a minute, then whistled. Lady, you got a problem, he said. What is it, I asked. He pointed to a bundle of wires near the fuse box. See this? This ain't wear and tear. This is a clean cut. I leaned in. A yellow wire had been snipped. The ends were sharp. Someone cut your sensor line, he said. It trips the computer. Makes the car think it is dying. It won't stop the car. But it scares the hell out of the driver. He looked at me with suspicion. You got an angry ex-boyfriend or something. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not an attempt to kill me. It was a message. We can touch you. We can get to your car while you are inside a building. We can make you think you are crashing. It was psychological warfare. They wanted me to be afraid to drive. They wanted me to be afraid to move. Can you fix it? I asked. Yeah, I can splice it. Take 20 minutes. Fix it, I said. I stood by the vending machine while he worked, clutching the envelope under my jacket. I watched the road. Every car that passed looked like a black sedan. They had followed me. They had watched me go into the clinic. They knew I had met Marion, but they did not know I had the memorandum. If they did, they would not have just cut a wire. They would have run me off the road. I realized then that they were still underestimating me. They thought I was a scared paralegal who could be bullied into submission. They thought that cutting a wire would send me running back to Marrow Glen to sign their NDA. They did not know I was holding the match that would light the fuse. I drove back to Marrow Glen in silence. I did not speed. I did not stop. I drove with a cold, hard clarity that I had never felt before. I went straight to Ava's office. It was late, past 8 o'clock. She was still there, eating takeout at her desk. She looked up when I walked in. She saw my face and put down her fork. "You got it," she said. It was not a question. I pulled the envelope from my jacket and threw it on the desk. "I got it," I said. "A signed memorandum. Victor confessed to everything. The money laundering, the payoffs, the coercion. And he named Celeste as the one who stopped him from turning himself in." Ava picked up the document. She read it slowly, her eyes widening with every line. "This is it," she whispered. "This is the smoking gun. This connects North Pine to Dovetail to the estate. It proves the fraud is ongoing." She looked at me. "Natalie, if we file this, there is no going back. This is not just a probate dispute anymore. This is a criminal referral. The DOJ will get involved. The SEC. Celeste will be investigated. She might go to prison." I thought about Celeste screaming at me on the phone. "I am paying for survival." I thought about the cut wire in my car. I thought about Marion Kells, living a half-life in the fog. "I know," I said. Ava tapped the paper. "Victor begged you not to do this." She said, "In the recording, he told you to take the money and run if you wanted to be safe. He didn't leave me this so I could be safe." I said, "He left me this so I could be the one to decide. He was too weak to fix it. Celeste was too greedy to fix it." I looked at the window. At the reflection of the city lights, I am not weak. "Ava, and I am not greedy." I turned back to her. "File it," I said. "Enter it into the court record for the mediation." Ava took a deep breath. She pulled a fresh legal folder from her drawer. "Okay," she said. "We file tomorrow morning." She looked at the document one last time. "This is going to detonate everything," she said. "Let it burn," I said. I walked out of the office into the night air. The fear was still there, living in my throat. But it tasted different now. It didn't taste like bile anymore. It tasted like gasoline. The morning of the final evidentiary hearing. The air in Marrow Glen felt heavy, like a wool blanket soaked in water. I drove to the courthouse with Ava. Neither of us speaking. There was nothing left to say. We had the memorandum. We had the bank records. We had the truth. Now, we just had to see if the law cared. When we turned the corner toward the courthouse entrance, I gasped. The steps were crowded, not just with the usual smokers and bail bondsmen, but with cameras. A van from the Marrow Glen Ledger was parked illegally on the curb. A cluster of people who looked like they belonged in the Harthwell district stood near the doors, whispering. "Word has gotten out," Ava said, gripping the steering wheel. How I asked. "It is a probate case. Probate cases do not usually involve allegations of $40 million in laundered funds and a mysterious security firm." Ava said, "Someone leaked the motion we filed yesterday. Probably Wexler, trying to control the narrative before we even step inside." We fought our way through the crowd. I kept my head down, ignoring the few shouts of my name. I felt like an imposter. I was not a celebrity. I was a paralegal who bought her blazers at discount stores. Inside, Courtroom 4 was transformed. The empty benches were packed. The back row was filled with reporters, their pens poised over notepads. The front rows were occupied by sleek, well-dressed observers who watched me with the detached curiosity of people watching a car crash. Celeste was already there. She was wearing a soft gray suit today, something that made her look younger, more vulnerable. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the table. Darren Wexler was leaning over her, whispering urgently. We took our seats. Ava arranged her files with military precision. Do not look at them, she whispered to me. Look at the judge. Judge Holloway entered. The bailiff shouted, and we all stood. The judge looked tired. She looked at the packed gallery with distaste, then turned her gaze to the attorneys. This is a hearing to determine the validity of the final trust amendments and to address the petition for a special administrator. She said, I will not tolerate a circus. If I hear one outburst from the gallery, I will clear the room. Is that understood? Silence. Proceed. Mr. Wexler. Wexler stood up. He walked to the center of the room, buttoning his jacket. He looked confident. Your Honor, he began. This case is tragic. It is the story of a dying man, Victor Flores, who tried to protect his legacy from the instability of an estranged child. We will show that the amendments to the trust were not only valid but necessary, and we will show that the allegations made by the respondent are nothing more than a desperate attempt to smear a grieving family for financial gain. He called Celeste to the stand. Celeste walked up the short steps to the witness box. She took the oath in a soft, wavering voice. She looked at the judge with wide, tear-filled eyes. Ms. Flores. Wexler said gently, Tell the court about your relationship with your father in his final years. Celeste took a breath. She reached for a tissue. I was his caretaker, she said. After he got sick, he relied on me for everything. He was lonely. He missed Natalie, but she wouldn't return his calls. He used to sit by the phone on Sundays, hoping she would reach out. It broke his heart. A murmur went through the gallery. I stared straight ahead, digging my fingernails into my palms. It was a lie. He never called on Sundays. Sundays were his golf days. And the business Wexler asked, Did you help him with that? I tried. Celeste said, He was under so much pressure. He was terrified of losing everything he had built. He told me he needed to restructure things to keep the company safe. He trained me to handle the accounts. He said I was the only one he could trust because I was the only one who stayed. She looked at me then, a sad, pitying look. I do not blame Natalie for leaving. She said, She has her own life, but she does not understand the burden Dad was carrying. She thinks this is about money. It is not. It is about protecting his name. Wexler let the silence hang for a moment. Thank you. Ms. Flores. Ava stood up. She did not walk to the center of the room. She stood behind the table, rifling through a stack of papers. Ms. Flores, Ava said, her voice sharp and clear. You say you were the only one your father could trust, that you were trained to handle the accounts. Yes, Celeste said, her voice hardening slightly. And part of that training involved the vendor payments, Ava asked. Yes, standard accounts payable. Ava picked up a document. I have here a record of payments from Flores Meridian Holdings to a vendor called Dovetail Risk Strategies. Are you familiar with this company? Celeste hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Yes, she said. They provided security consulting. And did you personally authorize payments to this company? Sometimes. Ava picked up another document. And can you explain why? Starting 3 years ago, Dovetail Risk Strategies began making monthly payments of $5,000 to you personally. The room went deadly quiet. Wexler jumped up. Objection, relevance overruled, Judge Holloway said, leaning forward. Answer the question, Ms. Flores. Celeste gripped the railing of the witness box. Her knuckles were white. It was a consulting arrangement. She stammered. I acted as a liaison. A liaison, Ava asked, for a security firm. What qualifications do you have in risk management? Ms. Flores, I knew the family history. I helped them assess potential threats to the estate. Threats, Ava pressed. Or secrets, objection, Wexler shouted. Argumentative, sustained. The judge said, rephrase. Ms. Klein. Ava lowered the paper. Ms. Flores, is it not true that these payments began the same week your father drafted a memorandum attempting to confess to financial crimes. Is it not true that you received this money in exchange for preventing him from going to the authorities? No, Celeste cried. That is a lie. I was protecting him from what Ava snapped. From the truth? Or from the people paying you? Celeste looked at Wexler, panic rising in her chest. No further questions, Ava said. Sitting down. Celeste stepped down from the stand. She looked shaken. The soft, gray vulnerability was gone, replaced by a brittle fear. Wexler looked furious. He whispered something to his associate, then looked at the judge. We reserve the right to recall the witness, he said. Judge Holloway nodded. Ms. Klein, call your first witness. I call Natalie Flores. Ava said. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like they were made of lead. I walked to the stand and sat down. The wood was warm from Celeste. I swore to tell the truth. Ms. Flores, Ava began gently. Why are you here? I looked at the gallery. I looked at the reporters. Then I looked at the judge. I am here because my father left me a key. I said, and a warning. Were you close to your father? Ava asked. No. I said, I have not spoken to him in years. He was a difficult man. He was cold, and he was controlling. A ripple of surprise went through the room. They expected me to play the victim, to cry about the lost relationship. So you did not ask him for money? Ava asked. Never. I said, I did not want his money. I wanted nothing from him. Then why fight this petition? Why not take the settlement your sister offered because of the lies? I said, my voice was steady now. Celeste claims I manipulated him. She claims I am unstable. But the only manipulation I found was in the trust itself. My father left me a share of the estate on the condition that I expose what he was doing. And what was he doing? He was laundering money for a criminal enterprise through a shell foundation called North Pine. I said clearly, Objection, Wexler roared. Lacks foundation hearsay. I have the documents, Your Honor, Ava said calmly. She picked up the flash drive and the forensic report. Your Honor, we move to admit the contents of the safe deposit box retrieved by the respondent. These files include a ledger detailing the payments to North Pine, and a forensic analysis connecting those payments to the personal accounts of the petitioner. Wexler was turning purple. This is ambush litigation, he shouted. We have not had time to authenticate these digital files. You had the metadata for a week. Mr. Wexler, the judge said coldly, I will allow the ledger into evidence for the limited purpose of establishing the timeline of transactions. The forensic report regarding the email fabrication is also admitted. Ava projected the ledger onto the screen in the courtroom. Rows of numbers, dates, and the note at the bottom. 40 million can disappear cleanly if everyone stays quiet. The reporters in the back row were typing furiously. I looked at Celeste. She was staring at the screen, her face pale as a sheet. She knew what this meant. It wasn't just a lost lawsuit, it was an indictment. Ava finished with me. I stepped down. I felt lighter, as if I had finally dropped the weight I had been carrying since the funeral. Next, Ava called Hollis Crane. Hollis took the stand with the weary professionalism of a man who had testified in 1,000 rooms just like this one. Mr. Crane, please explain your findings regarding North Pine Community Foundation. Ava said. Hollis adjusted his glasses. North Pine is a pass-through entity. He explained, it has no charitable activities. Its board is comprised of former executives of Dovetail Risk Strategies. The funds flowing into North Pine match, almost to the dollar. The funds flowing out to various individuals located in relocation zones, often used by Dovetail for witness suppression. Suppression, Ava asked. Reputation containment. Hollis corrected. That is the industry term. They pay people to disappear. And did you find a connection to the Flores estate? Yes. Hollis said, Victor Flores was the primary funding source for North Pine for the last 10 years. He was essentially bankrolling a private witness protection program for a defunct credit union scandal. The courtroom buzzed. This was the bigger story, the local angle. The Briarvale collapse was a scar on the city's history. And now, Suddenly, it was bleeding again. Wexler did not cross-examine Hollis. He knew better. He knew Hollis had the receipts. Instead, Wexler stood up with a smirk. "Your Honor, the defense calls Mr. Arthur Vance." I looked at Ava. We did not know an Arthur Vance. The doors opened, and a man walked in. He was slick. That was the only word for him. He wore a suit that was too shiny, and his hair was gelled back aggressively. He walked to the stand with a swagger. "Mr. Vance," Wexler said, "what is your occupation?" "I am a senior security consultant," Vance said. "I specialize in corporate espionage and fraud detection. And have you investigated the parties in this case?" "I have." "What did you find regarding the so-called evidence presented by Ms. Flores?" Vance turned to look at me. His eyes were cold and mocking. "I found that Ms. Flores has been in contact with a known identity thief operating out of Sebring," he said, "a woman formerly known as Marion Kells, who was fired for embezzlement 15 years ago." My breath hitched. They were going after Marion. "This woman," Vance continued, "has a history of fabricating documents to extort former employers. It is my professional opinion that Ms. Flores is being manipulated by this fraudster. The ledger, the memorandum, they fit the pattern of Kells's previous scams. Ms. Flores is not a whistleblower. Your Honor, she is a dupe. It was a brilliant, vicious lie. It took everything we had built the truth and twisted it into a narrative of gullibility." Ava jumped up. "Objection. This witness offers no proof of these allegations. This is character assassination. It goes to credibility, Your Honor." Wexler argued, "If the source of the documents is poisoned, the fruit is poisonous." The judge looked conflicted. She was a probate judge, not a criminal judge. She was out of her depth. "I will allow the testimony to stand for now," she said cautiously. "But you better have proof of this fraud." "Mr. Wexler." I looked at Celeste. She was smiling, a small, tight smile of relief. They had found a way out. They were going to bury Marion, and bury me with her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout that they were lying, that Marion was a victim, that Arthur Vance was a paid shill for Dovetail. But I sat frozen. And then, the air in the room changed. It was not a sound. It was a shift in pressure. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom did not bang open. They swung open smoothly, silently, held by a firm hand. A man walked in. He was tall. He wore a black suit that absorbed the light. It was not a fashion statement. It was a uniform. His shirt was white, crisp, and his tie was a dark, matte charcoal. He carried a thin, sealed leather folder in one hand. He did not look at the gallery. He did not look at the cameras. He walked straight down the center aisle, his footsteps heavy and deliberate on the parquet floor. The murmuring stopped. Even the reporters stopped typing. The bailiff stepped forward to intercept him. "Sir, you cannot just walk in here." The man did not stop. He simply held up a credential. It was in a leather wallet, flipped open. I did not see what it said, but I saw the bailiff's face. He went pale. He stepped back immediately, flattening himself against the wall. The man walked past the bar, past our table, past Wexler, and stopped directly in front of the judge's bench. Judge Holloway looked down. She was a woman who did not like to be interrupted, but she did not bang her gavel. She looked at the man, and for the first time all day, she looked uncertain. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but quieter than before. The man placed the leather folder on the judge's bench. He spoke. His voice was a deep baritone, calm and terrifyingly devoid of emotion. "My name is Elias Rourke," he said. "I am appearing on behalf of the Office of Fiduciary Oversight, Special Division." He placed his credential on the bench next to the folder. "I am intervening in this matter pursuant to the Harbor Shield Agreement of 2010. This probate case has breached a protected legal framework involving national financial security." The room was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Wexler stood up, but he looked confused. "Your Honor, I have never heard of this office. This is highly irregular. Sit down." "Mr. Wexler," Elias said. He did not turn around. He did not raise his voice. It was a command. Not a request. Wexler sat. Judge Holloway picked up the credential. She studied it for a long moment, then she picked up the sealed folder. The red tape on the folder was stamped with a seal I did not recognize. Mr. Rourke, the judge said. What are you asking for? I am not asking. Your Honor, Elias said. I am informing the court that certain evidence presented here today, specifically the ledger regarding North Pine Community Foundation, is classified under a federal non-disclosure order. He turned his head slightly, just enough to catch Celeste's eye. She looked like she was about to faint. Furthermore, he continued, the testimony of Mr. Arthur Vance is in violation of that same order. Mr. Vance is a contractor for a private entity that is currently under federal audit. His clearance has been revoked as of this morning. Vance, on the stand, looked like he wanted to vanish. He stood up abruptly. Sit down. The bailiff barked, emboldened by the new dynamic. Judge Holloway looked at the folder. I need to review this, she said. In chambers. Your Honor? Elias said. Alone. The judge nodded. We are in recess, she said quickly. Everyone remain in place. She grabbed the folder and the credential and disappeared into her chambers. The courtroom exploded into noise. Reporters were shouting into phones. Wexler was frantically whispering to Celeste. Ava turned to me, her eyes wide. Who is he? She whispered. I do not know. I said, but he is not with them. I looked at Elias Rourke. He was standing at ease near the bailiff's station. He was not looking at anyone. He was just waiting. He looked like a statue carved out of obsidian. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. The tension was unbearable. Celeste was weeping silently now. Vance was sweating through his shiny suit. Finally, the door to the chambers opened. Judge Holloway walked out. She looked different. She looked pale. She walked to the bench and sat down. She did not pick up her gavel. She folded her hands in front of her. The room fell silent instantly. The court has reviewed the filings provided by Mr. Rourke, she said. Her voice was tight, careful. Every word seemed measured, effective immediately. The testimony of Arthur Vance is stricken from the record. Mr. Vance, you are excused. In fact, I suggest you leave my courtroom immediately. Vance practically ran out the side door. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am placing a temporary seal on the specific names listed in the North Pine ledger. However, she paused. She looked at Celeste. The existence of the ledger itself and the financial transfers from the estate to the foundation are ruled admissible. The court finds that the petitioner, Celeste Flores, has engaged in a pattern of obfuscation. The petition to freeze the respondent's assets is denied with prejudice. She turned to Elias. Mr. Rourke, regarding the wider implications. The office will handle the compliance issues. Your Honor, Elias said, the estate can proceed to distribution, provided the assets are separated from the North Pine accounts. Judge Holloway nodded. This hearing is adjourned pending a final written order. She stood up and left the bench faster than I had ever seen a judge move. It was over. We had won. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a stay of execution. Ava slumped in her chair, letting out a long breath. My God, she said. What just happened? I stood up. I looked across the aisle. Celeste was still sitting there, staring at the empty witness stand. She looked small, defeated, and for the first time, I saw the cage she had been living in. Wexler was packing his briefcase with furious, jerky movements. He wouldn't look at us. I turned to leave. Ms. Flores. The voice was deep and quiet. I turned around. Elias Rourke was standing behind me, up close. He was even more intimidating. His eyes were a dark, piercing gray. He smelled of rain and cold air. He held out a card. It was plain white, with a single phone number on it. Mr. Rourke. I said, Thank you. I think... He did not smile. Do not thank me, he said. I didn't come here to save you. I came here to close a breach. He looked over my shoulder at Celeste, then back at me. Your father was a complicated man. Ms. Flores. He played a dangerous game. He tried to fix it, I said defensively. He tried to pass the buck, Elias corrected, and he passed it to you. He took a step closer. His voice dropped so low only I could hear it. The judge sealed the names, but the investigation is live. You started something today that cannot be stopped. North Pine is finished. Dovetail is exposed. Is that a bad thing, I asked? It is a dangerous thing, he said. You blew the whistle. Now everyone hears the noise. He looked directly into my eyes. His gaze was intense, assessing. Your father didn't leave you money, Natalie. He left you a choice, and the court is now part of it. What choice, I asked? To walk away with your share and forget you ever heard the name Harbor Shield, he said. Or to finish what you started and help us take the whole structure down. He pressed the card into my hand. If you choose the latter, call me. He turned and walked away, moving through the crowd like a shark moving through water. The reporters parted for him, sensing that he was not someone to be questioned. I looked down at the white card in my hand. Ava came up beside me. Who was that? She asked. What did he say? I watched the black suit disappear through the heavy doors. He said the game isn't over. I said, he said it is just beginning. The courtroom had transformed from a place of judgment into a place of containment. The air was thick with the kind of silence that usually precedes an explosion. Following the recess, the gallery was fuller than before, but the mood had shifted. The gossip had died down, replaced by a nervous energy. The man in the black suit, Elias Rourke, sat at a small table that had been hastily arranged near the bench, separate from the plaintiff and defense. He looked like a monolith, unmoved by the whispers and the staring eyes. Judge Holloway returned to the bench. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the last hour. She adjusted her glasses and spoke into the microphone. We are back on the record, she said. The court has granted a limited motion for testimony from the Office of Fiduciary Oversight. Mr. Rourke, please take the stand. Elias walked to the witness box. He moved with a terrifying efficiency. He did not look at the cameras. He did not look at Celeste, who was now trembling visibly at the defense table. He sat down and stated his name. Elias Rourke, Special Auditor, Mr. Rourke. The judge said, You have intervened in this probate matter citing a federal framework known as Harbor Shield. For the record, within the limits of your clearance, can you explain what Harbor Shield is? Elias leaned into the microphone. His voice was deep, resonant, and completely devoid of inflection. Harbor Shield was a private sector initiative established in the wake of the Briar Vale Credit Union collapse. He stated, its stated purpose was the relocation and protection of high-risk witnesses and whistleblowers who were vulnerable to retaliation from non-state actors. In practice, it functioned as a liability containment structure for the financial institutions involved. And what was the nature of Victor Flores's involvement, the judge asked. Victor Flores was a participating party, Elias said. He acted as a funding conduit, through his company, Flores Meridian Holdings, and the entity known as North Pine Community Foundation. Mr. Flores financed the relocation and ongoing stipends of 7 individuals. Was this arrangement voluntary, the judge asked? Initially, yes, Elias said. However, the records indicate that 3 years ago, Mr. Flores attempted to exit the arrangement. He filed a formal breach notice with the Oversight Board, alleging that the program had exceeded its mandate and was being used for coercion rather than protection. A gasp went through the room. I felt Ava's hand grip my arm. A breach notice, Ava whispered. That is what he meant in the recording. He tried to stop it. The judge looked down at her notes. And what happened after this notice was filed, she asked. The notice was withdrawn 2 days later, Elias said. By an authorized proxy. Who was the proxy? Elias turned his head slowly. He looked directly at Celeste. Celeste Flores, he said. Celeste let out a small, strangled sound. Darren Wexler put a hand on her shoulder, pressing her down into her chair. The judge turned her gaze to Celeste. It was a look of pure ice. Mr. Rourke, the judge continued, the trust in question contains a specific clause requiring the beneficiary, Natalie Flores, to complete a series of compliance steps, including mandatory attendance at all evidentiary hearings. In your expert opinion, what was the purpose of these steps? Elias looked at me for the first time since taking the stand. His eyes were unreadable. They were a tripwire. He said, "Explain," the judge ordered. Victor Flores knew that if he simply left the money to Natalie, she would likely take it and disappear, or Celeste would manipulate the funds before Natalie ever saw them. Elias explained. He structured the trust to force a confrontation. He required Natalie to be present in court because he knew that any legal challenge to the estate would inevitably expose the North Pine ledger. He could not expose the scheme while he was alive without destroying his family, so he engineered a legal mechanism that would force the court to expose it after his death. I sat back, stunned. The cruelty I had felt, the cold. Controlling nature of the will was not cruelty at all. It was a desperate, architectural plan. My father had turned his own probate into a trap for the people who had silenced him. He had used me as the bait. Yes, but he had also given me the teeth to snap the trap shut. The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you. Mr. Rourke, you may step down, but do not leave the building." Elias returned to his table. The judge turned to the defense table. "Mr. Wexler," she said, "your client is listed as the proxy who withdrew the breach notice. We have heard testimony that she received payments from a security firm connected to this scheme. Do you have any explanation for why your client was paid to silence her own father?" Wexler stood up. He looked pale. The swagger was gone. "Your Honor," he began, his voice shaking slightly. "My client was acting under extreme duress. She was told that if the breach notice went through, the family assets would be seized by creditors. She was trying to save the estate from bankruptcy." "Save it?" the judge asked sharply. "Or milk it?" She pulled a document from the folder Elias had provided. "I have here a communication log between Celeste Flores and an intermediary at Dovetail Risk Strategies. In an email dated shortly after the breach notice was withdrawn, your client asks, and I quote, will this ensure the monthly consulting arrangement continues?" The judge looked over her glasses at Celeste. "That does not sound like duress." "Ms. Flores, that sounds like negotiation." Celeste stood up. She ignored Wexler's hissed command to sit down. I did not know she cried out. Her voice cracked, high and desperate. I did not know they were hurting people. I thought it was just fees. I thought it was just business. Dad told me to handle it, he said. "Celeste, you are the strong one. You are the one who can make the hard calls. Natalie is too soft. Natalie will break." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "He chose me," she screamed. "He chose me to protect us because he knew I could do what had to be done." I looked at my sister. Her face was twisted with fear and a terrible, dawning realization, and suddenly, I understood. Victor did not favor Celeste because he loved her more. He favored her because he feared for her less. He looked at me and saw someone who would ask questions, someone who would stumble over moral lines. He looked at Celeste and saw someone who would pave over them. He thought she could handle the burden of his sins, but he was wrong. She could not handle it. She had taken the burden and mistaken it for power. She thought she was running the family empire, but she was just the janitor for its crimes. And now, the toxic waste was rising around her ankles, and she did not know how to swim. "Ms. Flores, sit down," the judge barked. Celeste collapsed back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. Ava leaned toward me. "Now," she whispered, "we move for the kill." Ava stood up. "Your Honor, in light of the testimony from the special auditor and the admissions from the petitioner, we move to compel full disclosure of the North Pine ledger and all associated contracts. We also move to introduce the memorandum provided by Marion Kells, now known as Sarah O'Malley, into the permanent record." Wexler jumped up. "Objection, Your Honor. That memorandum is unverified, and entering it into the public record would violate the privacy of the individuals named in the Harbor Shield program." The judge held up a hand. "I am inclined to agree with the plaintiff, Mr. Wexler. However, given the sensitive nature of the document, I will take a brief recess to determine the scope of the redactions." 10 minutes. The gavel banged. The room erupted into noise again. Reporters were shouting questions at Elias, who ignored them completely. I sat still, feeling the adrenaline vibrate in my fingertips. Natalie, Ava said, "We need to step outside. The air in here is toxic." We walked out into the hallway. It was crowded, but people parted for us. I saw the respect in their eyes now, or maybe it was fear. We stood near a water fountain. I took a long drink, the cold water shocking my system. "Natalie." I turned. Celeste was standing there. She was alone. Wexler was nowhere to be seen. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared. She looked like a ghost of the polished socialite who had insulted me at the funeral. "Please," she whispered. I looked at her. "Please what?" "Celeste." "Take the money," she said. Her voice was a jagged whisper. "I can get them to authorize a payout. A big one. 500,000, maybe $1 million. Just drop the memorandum. Do not enter it into the record." Why, I asked. Why does it matter now? "Elias has already testified." "Elias is just an auditor," she said, grabbing my hand. Her palms were clammy. "If you enter the memorandum, it becomes a criminal referral. It goes to the DOJ. It goes to the FBI. They will come for me. Natalie. They will put me in prison." I pulled my hand away. "You took the money." "Celeste, you took $5,000 a month to keep Dad quiet." I was scared, she hissed. "You do not know these people. They own everything. They will destroy us. They are already destroying us." I said, "They destroyed Dad. They destroyed Marion Kells. And they destroyed you. Celeste, look at you. You are a wreck." She flinched as if I had slapped her. "I am your sister," she sobbed. "Does that mean nothing to you?" "Dad wanted us to be a family. Dad wanted us to be free," I said, "and we cannot be free if we are lying. Natalie, please," she begged. "I will give you the house. I will give you everything. Just let it die." I looked at her, and I felt a profound sadness. She still thought this was a transaction. She still thought she could buy her way out of the consequences. She did not understand that some debts could not be paid with money. "I cannot do that." I said. Her face hardened. The fear turned into something ugly. "You are going to regret this," she spat. "You think you are the hero? You are just the girl who burned down her own house." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I am not the one locking the doors from the outside." I turned and walked back into the courtroom. I did not look back. When the session resumed, the atmosphere was electric. The judge looked solemn. "The court has made a determination," Judge Holloway announced. "The Memorandum of Understanding, authored by Victor Flores and witnessed by Marion Kells, will be admitted into the record. The names of the protected witnesses will be redacted for their safety. But the structural details of the North Pine transfers and the involvement of the estate will be public." She looked at Ava. "You may proceed." "Ms. Klein?" Ava walked to the clerk's desk and handed over the envelope. "Your Honor, the plaintiff enters Exhibit G, the signed confession of Victor Flores." The clerk stamped the document. The sound echoed like a gunshot. A collective exhale went through the room. It was done. The secret was out. The judge shuffled her papers and looked out at the courtroom. "Based on the evidence presented," she began, her voice ringing with authority, "this court issues the following ruling. First, the assets of the Flores Family Legacy Trust are to be immediately frozen and placed under the administration of a neutral fiduciary appointed by this court. Second, the petitioner, Celeste Flores, is hereby removed as executor of the estate. She is barred from accessing any estate funds or acting on behalf of the estate in any capacity pending the outcome of a federal inquiry." Celeste let out a sob, burying her face in her arms on the table. "Third," the judge continued, "the court finds that the respondent, Natalie Flores, has satisfied the compliance steps of the trust. Her share of the inheritance is recognized and protected. However," she paused. She looked at Elias Rourke, then at me. "The court acknowledges that the entry of this memorandum triggers mandatory reporting requirements under the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and the Department of Justice guidelines. By placing this evidence on the record, the estate is now subject to criminal investigation. She leaned forward. Ms. Flores, you have won your case, but you have also initiated a process that is out of your control. Do you understand this? I stood up. I understand, Your Honor. The judge nodded. This court is adjourned. The gavel banged. Pandemonium broke out. Reporters leaped over the benches to get to the aisle. Wexler was dragging a weeping Celeste out the side door. Ava turned to me and hugged me. Hard. We did it. She said, God help us. We did it. I did not feel like celebrating. I felt numb. I looked over Ava's shoulder. Elias Rourke was still sitting at his table. He was packing his folder calmly, as if he were closing a meeting at a bank. He caught my eye. He nodded. Once, a microscopic acknowledgement. I pulled away from Ava. I need to speak to him, I said. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring the microphones shoved in my face. Ms. Flores. Is it true? Your father was a criminal, Natalie? Are you going to press charges against your sister? How much money is in the trust? I reached the small table. Elias was standing up, buttoning his jacket. Mr. Rourke, I said. He stopped. Mrs. Flores. You said the court is part of it now. I said, what happens next? He looked down at me, up close. His eyes were not just gray, they were the color of steel that had been left out in the rain. Next comes the fallout, he said. The memorandum triggers a civil referral. The IRS will audit the estate going back 20 years. The DOJ will open a file on Dovetail. Your sister will likely be indicted for fraud and conspiracy. And the witnesses I asked, Marion, he hesitated. Harbor Shield is compromised. He said, we will have to relocate them again. It will be difficult. But now that the coercion is public, Dovetail loses its leverage. They cannot threaten people who are already in the news. So they are free, I asked. They are safer, he corrected. Freedom is a relative term in this business. He picked up his folder. And you, Ms. Flores, you are now a key witness in a federal investigation. You will be deposed. You will be subpoenaed. Your life as a quiet paralegal is over. I know. I said, he studied me. Most people would have taken the money. He said, your sister offered you a way out in the hallway. I saw it. How did you... I started, then stopped. Of course he saw it. Why didn't you take it, he asked. I thought about the bleach smell in the house. I thought about the cut wire in my car. I thought about the note in the vent. If you want the truth, do not trust the first story, because my father spent his whole life buying silence. I said, and look where it got him. He died alone in a house that didn't feel like a home. I do not want to end up like that. Elias looked at me for a long moment. Then, for the first time, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was not a happy smile. It was a grim, approving expression. You won't, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. It was different from the first one. This one had an emblem on it, a shield. If you ever need a job that pays better than a paralegal, call me, he said. We need people who do not blink. He handed me the card and walked away, cutting through the crowd like a knife. I stood there in the center of the courtroom. The noise was deafening, but I felt a strange, cold calm. Ava came up beside me. Natalie, the reporters are waiting. What do you want to do? I looked at the judge's empty bench. I looked at the seal of the court on the wall. I want to go on the record. I said, we walked to the stenographer, who was packing up her machine. Excuse me, I said. The woman looked up, surprised. I need to make a statement for the record. I said, before you close the file. The woman looked at Ava, who nodded. She sat back down and opened her laptop. Go ahead. Ms. Flores. I took a breath. Natalie Flores. Refuse any private settlement or payout from the unadministered assets of the estate. I said clearly. I request that the court preserve all evidence presented today, specifically the North Pine Ledger, and ensure it is delivered directly to the United States Department of Justice. Ava looked at me, shocked. Natalie, you are waiving your right to an immediate payout. I am not fighting for the payout. I said, I am fighting to finish it. I looked at the stenographer. I understand that this action may delay the distribution of the estate for years. I understand that it may result in the public vilification of my family name. I accept these consequences. My father left me a choice. I choose the truth. The stenographer typed the words. "Thank you," she said softly. I turned to Ava. "Let's go home." We walked out of the courthouse. The sun had broken through the clouds, washing the gray streets of Marrow Glen in a harsh, bright light. The photographers started flashing their bulbs, a storm of lightning in the middle of the day. I put on my sunglasses. I did not run. I did not hide my face. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the concrete. I was broke. I was exhausted. My family was in ruins, and I had a target on my back that was now visible to the entire world. But as I reached the bottom of the steps, I reached into my pocket and touched the small silver key. I took it out and looked at it one last time. Then, I tossed it into a trash can near the curb. I did not need it anymore. I had unlocked the box. The story was mine now. Thank you so much for listening to My Wealthy Sister Demanded My Inheritance in Court. Then a man in a black suit walked in and... I hope you enjoyed this journey of secrets, betrayal, and justice. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please drop a comment below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel so you do not miss the next episode. And I want to hear your thoughts. Did Natalie make the right choice by refusing the money and exposing the truth, or should she have taken the payout and walked away? Let me know in the comments in English. Until next time, stay safe and keep watching.